In South Africa, mining companies are legislated to have social and labour plans in place which speak to companies investing in local infrastructure, housing, education and other local and rural community upliftment projects. The basis of this is to ensure that the communities that mining companies operate in are not left behind in terms of development. After all, they're operating on their land. This principle also aligns with the global ambitions of companies being cognizant of the environment, social and governance or ESG aspects of their business, ensuring that all stakeholders benefit. Well, to discuss how mining companies can go beyond their legal obligations to create a lasting legacy in the communities that they operate in, I'm joined by Paula-Ann Novotny. She's a partner at Webber Wentzel. Thank you so much for joining us, Paula-Ann. So before we get into the details of miners ensuring a lasting legacy for communities, please just outline what the responsibilities are of the state to communities that happen to have mining capabilities, and then what the mining companies' responsibilities are.
Thanks very much for having me, and it's lovely to be here today. I think the first point of departure is always our constitution. We are a constitutional dispensation country. And so the state's obligations are rooted in providing access to basic services, protecting and promoting the basic and fundamental human rights that are situated within our Bill of Rights. Through that, our government has given effect to various of those state obligations through legislation. And the Mining and Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act is one such piece of legislation that regulates the mining sector and gives force to things like the SLPs being a requirement on mining companies in a social upliftment context. So the interplay between government obligations as the custodian of our mineral resources and on mining companies as perpetrators of their corporate obligations becomes a balancing act that's rooted in our legislation and that's guided by different forms of guidelines and frameworks, not only locally, but now also internationally.
Yeah, so what trends are you seeing globally around how mining companies are ensuring that they take the communities that they operate in with them? And would you say that South Africa, because of its apartheid legacy, has been a leader in this regard?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. I think the biggest development we're seeing is the concept of sustainable development coming back to the fore. And we're seeing various international jurisdictions framing that around a human rights context and what the corporate duty is to respect human rights in parallel or alongside, but independent to government's duties to promote and protect those human rights. And so how corporates go about discharging that duty, preventing human rights from violations from occurring within their zone of influence and addressing violations where they do occur is becoming a key focus area. And South African and African mining companies are quite attuned to these obligations. You know, we have this idea of a social license to operate, which most companies are very familiar with. And so now it's becoming an exercise of rejigging how your corporate governance structures are set up, how your responses and corporate actions are delivered to be contextual to the community's needs within which you operate, as well as the broader stakeholder base, as well as the influence you have within your business relationships. So that compliance net is increasing in line with international expectations and the evolutions of duties and obligations that we're seeing imposed on corporate actors in today's day and age.
So some of the mining sector globally, as well as here at home, have had a bad rap for not having regard to the wider community and just being obsessed with the extraction of minerals and making profit for shareholders. Ideally, in these times, what measures should mining companies have in place to not only ensure that communities are surviving, but also ensuring that they remain sustainable long after mining operations have concluded?
Yeah, there are multiple avenues, routes and tools that are available to mining companies, which is some of the work that we're increasingly being involved in. That value beyond regulatory compliance piece is re-looking at your SLPs and understanding what are the contextual needs and desires of the community that you operate in, making sure your stakeholder engagement platforms are transparent, have appropriate grievance mechanisms in place for internal stakeholders as well as your external communities, long-term planning post-mine closure, looking at the contextualities of where we operate, the regions in which we now exist, making sure that your mine closure planning includes things like economic diversification, skills transfer for a post-mining landscape, conducting adequate human rights due diligence so that you understand the full stakeholder makeup of the communities that you operate in, as well as the business relationships that you have influence over, or that might influence how you make corporate decisions to mine, not mine, and close down mines in the future are some of the examples.
And very quickly, Paula-Ann, in the meantime, what should the role of government be, and what is it that communities can do themselves to ensure that they get the best deal from mining companies?
Governments need to stick true to the constitutional obligations that they're entitled to fulfill. Municipalities hopefully will become more ingrained in that situation. As you know, we have significant issues across many municipalities being under administration. And so appropriately resourcing them, both from a governance perspective as well as a financial perspective, will become crucial, particularly because municipal involvement is needed to establish what your regional requirements are from a social upliftment and sustainable development perspective. So capacitating and building public-private relations is one of the key instances in which corporates can assist to influence or guide or capacitate government in areas where they may be lacking the resources, skills, or finances to do so themselves.
Paula-Ann Novotny, thank you very much for speaking to us. She's a partner at Webber Wentzel.